Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press conference at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. We are pleased to have with us the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, Ms. Francesca Albanese. Ms. Albanese was appointed as the holder of this mandate by the UN Human Rights Council back in March 2022. She assumed her function on May 1st, 2022, and she presented her first report to the Human Rights Council yesterday, a report that has been shared with you. And as the Special Rapporteur said yesterday, a report that focuses on the arbitrary deprivation of liberty in the occupied Palestinian territory. So I resent to all of you a copy of a report, of her opening statement, and of a press release. And Ms. Albanese will make short opening remarks before taking your questions. Ms. Albanese, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I decided to write my second report and my first report to the Human Rights Council on the theme of arbitrary deprivation of liberty because of the gravity of the situation on the ground and the magnitude of the phenomenon. Over 56 years, Israel has incarcerated about 1 million Palestinians, and the dates we have is that it's often referred to, including in my report, is 100,000, but this is updated to 2006, and the phenomenon is ongoing. There are 5,000 Palestinians incarcerated, including 1,100 without charge, without trial, and it's the violence that this deprivation of liberty has been accompanied by is also fully documented, and it has been fully documented since the beginning of the occupation and more systematically so since the first Intifada. This is what determined my choice to focus on this topic. But through intense months of research and consultations, I realized that the phenomenon is more widespread and systematic than I thought, because I looked on the one hand at the military orders and the emergency laws that have been inherited from the colonial past, from the British Mandate era, that are still applied to the Palestinians. And I also looked at the practices, and what I can see, and without condoning violent acts that Palestinians might have committed during decades of illegal occupation of what remains of historical Palestine, in the land that Israel has occupied since 1967. What leads to the mass incarceration, what leads to these huge numbers is that most criminal convictions result from violations of international law and criminalization of ordinary acts of life. And just to give you an example, Palestinians are subject to long detention for expressing opinions, gathering, pronouncing unauthorized political speeches, or even merely attempting to do so. This is fully documented in the report. So I eventually concluded that the overall system is intended to make the Palestinians an incarcerable threat. Palestinians are presumed guilty without evidence, arrested without warrants, detained without charge or trial, very often, and brutalized in Israeli custody. This is also fully documented, not only in my report, but by Israeli, Palestinian, and international human rights organizations, including the UN, who have recorded these incidents over decades. And why Israel does so? To advance its colonization of the occupied territory, because by deeming all Palestinians as a potential security threat, Israel is blurring the line between its own security and the security of its annexation plan. Because, and this is the last point I wanted to share with you, the mass arrest and incarceration happen in proximity of settlements, within 1 kilometer from the settlements. And in fact, Israel has built settlements, segregated roads, walls, checkpoints, a physical infrastructure that complements beyond bars the arbitrary deprivation of liberty that happens behind bars. And this is supported also by bureaucratic architecture made of permits, and bans that further confine and frustrate Palestinians in their limited land that remains to them. And on top of it, there is digital surveillance that is intertwined with the other barriers, the physical and the bureaucratic barriers I refer to. And this is why I concluded there is no other way to define the regime that Israel has imposed on the Palestinians, which is apartheid by default, other than an open-air prison.
Thank you, Ms. Albanese. So we'll now turn to questions from journalists. Is there any questions from the room? If not yet, I will first take a question online from Yuri Aprelev from RIA Novosti.
Yes, thank you for taking my questions. I have a lot of them, so I don't know if I can ask them at the same time or how do you want me to do. Okay, I will start. It's two topics, so maybe I will start with the first one. You have called on the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to launch an investigation into Israel's present policies as soon as possible. Has this appeal been heard? Have you had any contact with the International Criminal Court? Israel does not recognize the competence of the ICC. Why do you think an investigation could have an impact? This is the first topic. And my second is, how do you explain that no sanctions have been taken by the West against Israel, while many sanctions have been taken against Russia and Belarus? Is this hypocrisy, or how can you explain this fact? Thank you.
Yes, I have recommended in my reports that there should be an independent and thorough investigation into the possible commission of international crimes arising from the arbitrary deprivation of liberty of Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. This is a recommendation that is addressed, of course, to the International Criminal Court, where an investigation on the situation of Palestine is pending, but also to other courts, because there is universal jurisdiction and there are national courts that can investigate and prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, at least. And I've identified a number of them, like willful deprivation of protected person's right to fair and regular trial, unlawful deportation or transfer, or unlawful confinement. And the list includes apartheid, and it's in recommendation 102 in my report. I cannot answer the question why the ICC or the international community has been so steadfast on the case of Russia, but I can certainly question the delay in action and investigation on the question of the occupied Palestinian territory, because this is in the remit of my mandate. And this is a case that not only confirmed that justice delayed is justice denied, but also enforces the perception of the international community using and implementing double standards. And so the international fora as a place for privilege and not for rights. And frankly, the question of the work of the International Criminal Court or universal jurisdiction is important, regardless of what's individual states' opinions or recognition of the court. So I will stop here.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Any questions from online participants? Another question from Yuri Aprelev, RIA Novosti.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions. I don't understand why others don't have. But when you were in Israel and you spoke with the authorities, did you receive from them feedback as they want, and they are trying to understand the problems you are pointing, and they want to solve these problems, or you didn't feel that they understand what you are talking about, and they were, I don't know how to say, trying to not cooperate with you and your mandate in this case?
I've not been to Israel, and I've never intended to be in Israel. what it's in my mandate is to visit the occupied Palestinian territory, namely the territory that Israel tries to annex and to exert sovereignty on. Because of this illegal conduct, Israel obstructs my visit to the occupied Palestinian territory, which I know very well because I've lived there and I've spent long years traveling for research purposes. So I do see what's happening in that area. Nonetheless, I've tried since the very beginning of my mandate to engage with the Israeli authorities because of the important role they play. They remain the occupying power under international humanitarian law. The Israeli authorities do not respond, do not engage with my mandate. And of course, every time I write a report or any other communication, I consult the concerned states, and Israel never provides comment, neither positive nor negative. And of course, I assume that they understand very well what my concerns are. But this is besides the point, I suppose.
Thank you. Any other question? Any questions from the room or online? Nick Cumming-Bruce from the New York Times, please.
Good morning. Sorry, I've come to this a little bit late, so I've missed your opening remarks. But I just want to ask, the Commission of Inquiry has asked the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, to provide a ruling on the legality or otherwise of Israel's occupation. To what extent do you think, what are your expectations of that, or in what way do you think this can influence the narrative around Israel's involvement in OBT?
Thank you. I do have, to an extent, positive expectations in the sense that the questions that have been put forward to the court are very precise and refer to the right of self-determination, which has been not just violated, annihilated through 56 years of illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory since 1967. And also, I do trust that the court will shed light on the legal consequences of this protracted occupation, which frustrates and impedes the exercise of any other meaningful rights. Because what can people do when they are not free? So this is, and this really entails the basic application of international law and in the pure meaning of the right of self-determination, as also recognized as an inalienable right by the United Nations to the Palestinian people.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Albanese? Another one from Nick Cumming-Bruce?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just to follow up on that, I mean, legal consequences have been brought to light, if you like, by a lot of commentary over the years. Your predecessors in this mandate have provided extensive and detailed reporting on the impact of settlements. It doesn't seem to have changed the narrative at all internationally. So what difference would an ICJ ruling make?
Look, I don't think it's about narrative. It's about correcting, fixing the wrong. And international law for too long, specifically in this case, has been used, to quote my predecessor, as a menu à la carte. So picking what's convenient for fragmented, partial, and decontextualized analysis. Over 20 years plus, this mandate steadily from John Dugard, Richard Falk, Michael Link, and hopefully myself has given voice to a reality denouncing settler colonialism, apartheid, the illegality of the occupation, the very fact that the establishment of the settlements since the early days of the occupation is a war crime, correcting which would have avoided the situation that traps both Palestinians and Israelis now. So it's not really about a narrative. It's giving meaning to the international law as a regulatory and remedial framework to get out of the impasse in a way that recognizes rights without frustrating others. Because what I'm saying is protecting the rights of the Palestinian is a way to also ensure a present and future of peace and for the Israelis as well. Because when I say that they are trapped by the same settler colonial system that brutalizes the Palestinians, is because when they deliver a system, measures that are humanizing on the receiving end, they also get humanized themselves. And the last point on the legal consequences, again, using international law to address the situation means not to recognize as legal the conduct that lead to the current reality. So the legality of the occupation and its consequences. The settlements. So anything related to the settlement should be not recognized, not aided, and not supported in any possible way. There should be cessation of the wrongdoings and reparations for it. And in the meantime, there should be accountability. So justice and accountability and restoring the rule of law, this is what should be, to use your term, should be the narrative.
Thank you. And back to Yuri Aprelev from RIA Novosti.
Yes, thanks. The first question is, do you think that a two-state solution is really possible in the future? Because you know this topic. I mean, my question is, will there remain Palestinian territories if nothing is done, or is the risk of disappearance real of Palestinian territories and people? And my second question, I just don't know if it's fall within your mandate, but Israel has also annexed the Syrian Golan region. Does this issue fall in your mandate, and are the situations comparable there for the population? Because we never heard nothing about it.
I wish to read into the future, because this is one skill I do not have yet. So I do not know if the two-state solution will happen at some point. But what I can say is that the current reality goes in the opposite direction. And again, sorry for being a pedantic lawyer, but had international law be respected, we wouldn't be here. So if the international commitment to the two-state solution is so strong and still means something, well, it's a container that needs to be filled with a lot of content, and which means to stop Israel's military occupation, military order, military courts, armies conducting thousands of incursions per year in Palestinian areas. It means stopping the expansion of the settlement and regulating what has been built so far in a way that it's human rights compliant. And this is just the basic. So restoring Palestinian sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. This is the only way out. Concerning the Syrian Golan, no, this is outside of my mandate, but I can say that it's illegally annexed as of 1967. And Israel has treated it as it treats its Jerusalem, so as part of its own territory. And this should have faced the measures that the UN Charter affords for grave violations of international law and the UN Charter itself.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Albanese? Any questions online? Ms. Albanese, is there anything you would like to add before closing this press conference?
Not just thank you for your time and your interest.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to have you here in the press briefing room of the UN office at Geneva. And thank you all for your participation in today's press conference. Have a good afternoon.